Hi everyone, welcome to the YouTube video. This is a short little Wednesday video today, a little history video, because I think it's quite interesting, the topic of this man, not often discussed in history, a lot with much of what I'll talk about in, of course, World War I, and that is Paul Lettow-Vorbeck, the Lion of Africa. Let's get straight into this video. Born on 20th March 1870, Paul Lettow-Vorbeck grew up in, of course, Germany and was educated in a school in Berlin, and to start his military life in 1900, he went over China to fight in the Boxer Rebellion. And he did actually admit he did very much like Chinese culture. However, he was not pleased with, of course, the casualties that many German soldiers, and indeed many soldiers part of the Eight Nation Alliance, met in the Boxer Rebellion. Of course, the guerrilla-style tactics used by the Chinese boxers and rebels, etc. How, of course, that was just foreshadowing for what he would have to face later on in his life. In 1904, Africa was pretty much entirely colonised by that point by all European nations, apart from, of course, Libya. Italy had not quite got round to colonising that part yet. However, in 1904 there was, of course, the atrocity that was the, of course, Namibian genocide, where a lot of German soldiers killed, stabbed and shot Namibian people in Southwest Africa, or German Southwest Africa as it was known back then, for various reasons, mainly just, of course, domination, trying to secure more power. And of course, the British Empire was very, very close to their borders, and such as Walvis Bay, the British even set up a colony in German Southwest Africa, mainly because they wanted the territory for themselves. However, come the First World War, Paul Lettow-Vorbeck was assigned to German East Africa, probably the most valuable German territory out of its entire empire, very much so. Of course, it was definitely a thorn in specifically the British side. If they took over the territory fully, which they've been trying to since, well, pretty much the start of the late 18th century, of course sailing around to India, etc. And much of their Indian people to work also went to East Africa for working places like Kenya, Uganda, etc. In the First World War, of course they did Paul Lettow-Vorbeck and other Allied generals did agree not to fight over territory in colonial affairs, but that did not last. And particularly there was fighting between the 6th and 11th of August 1914, the Battle of Tanga occurred, where the British sent around 5,000 Indian soldiers to German East Africa to try and take over the territory and secure it. However, it did not go well. Paul Lettow-Vorbeck was very, very quick to his army, and instead relied on very much guerrilla tactics, booby traps, small army of men, marksmen, very specific marksmen, to fight in East Africa. Surprisingly, unlike other parts of the German Empire, Paul Lettow-Vorbeck never actually had much trouble gathering men in German East Africa. Many of the natives were actually quite loyal to the Germans and not the British, because they, of course, not met, like East Africa and Cameroon did, of course, the genocides, the massacring, etc. In East Africa, many natives were loyal to Germany, not the British or the French or the Belgians. So they managed a task force, and throughout the whole war, Paul Lettow-Vorbeck and his 2,490 soldiers managed to hold out and onto the East African territory. Of course, the war did drag on, and eventually by the late 1917 it was pretty clear the war was on the Allies' favour. But Paul Lettow-Vorbeck was determined to continue fighting, and agreed he would fight until the last man. And come the armistice on 11th November 1918, much of East Africa, the British had well established that continuous colony between Cape Town and Cairo at that point. They had that colony in most of East Africa, secure part of the British Empire. But nevertheless, there was still a task force around Tanga and other parts of Africa, specifically Lake Tanganyika. The Germans could still get supplies from, and of course the vast Indian Ocean as well, so they could still hold out. However, on the 25th of November 1918, Paul Lettow-Vorbeck heard of the armistice, and he agreed to surrender his soldiers. And after the war, he definitely was hailed as definitely a bit of a hero to the German soldiers. However, he did not like, later on in his life, Adolf Hitler. He was not pleased with him, what his ventures were, and later died, of course, later on in the 20th century, much into the Cold War. So Paul Lettow-Vorbeck was definitely an infamous general who definitely was a thorn in the Allied, the British side. What happened to East Africa afterwards was that it was turned into a full British protectorate, British Tanganyika, and it remained that way until 1961 when it gained independence from Britain. and remains part of the British Commonwealth today. There is still a little, in Zambia there is a little memorial to Paul and Lettow-Vorbeck. I'll put a little picture of it there so you can still visit yourself and learn about the history of him. And it's very, very interesting. Again, Africa is not really discussed much in World War I history, but it definitely should have. So yes, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in my next YouTube video. Goodbye.